Hello and welcome. Presidential Taskforce on COVID-19 raises concern over possible spike in coronavirus cases following massive disregard for precautions, says Nigeria is ready for clinical trial of vaccine and repatriation of citizens abroad. Mixed reactions over what was supposed to be gradual easing of lockdown in Lagos and Abuja as residents throng banks, breach transportation guidelines. Federal government receives over $300 million assets looted by a former military head of state, Sani Abacha, from the United States and the Bailiwick of Jersey. And world leaders pledge more than $8 billion to help develop coronavirus vaccine and fund research into diagnosis and treatment of the disease. Plus, we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, nearly 83 million Nigerians are currently living below poverty line in latest report from the National Bureau of Statistics.
And on sports news tonight, clubs in the top 2 German divisions returned 10 positive results from 1,724 coronavirus tests.
And from the nation's capital, President Muhammadu Buhari calls for international cooperation to fight COVID-19 as heads of state and government of the non-aligned movement unite in the fight against pandemic.
The Presidential Taskforce on COVID-19 has described compliance level with the health advisories on the first day of the relaxation of the lockdown in Lagos, Ogun and the FCT as very disappointing. The PTF chairman calls on security agencies to be more rigid with enforcement, while at the same time respecting the rights of citizens. The task force insists that the leadership of the country may have no other option than to order a total lockdown should the violations witnessed on the first day of the relaxation continue.
COVID-19 and Secretary to Government of the Federation.
The podium at the venue of the Presidential Task Force briefing in Abuja wears a new look with this bold sticker stressing the use of face mask.
You are invited to the podium, sir.
This briefing coincides with the first day of the relaxation of the lockdown in Lagos, Ogun and the Federal Capital Territory. As members expressed disappointment with the feedbacks they are getting.
The Presidential Task Force has been monitoring the level of compliance with some of the measures, and early observations showed lack of compliance with social distancing and wearing of masks or cloth coverings. We note particularly the chaotic scenes around the banks and other financial institutions. We must reiterate that the danger of infection is not over. State governments and security agencies have, however, been advised to enforce the measures rigidly, and violators will be prosecuted.
Yes, we're addressing individuals, but we really need to address corporate Nigeria. You know, one of the biggest groups that have allowed to restart business today were banks. Now, but many banks have not limited the number of branches that have opened. And yes, there's a benefit of that, but when you limit the number of branches that open, everybody goes to the one branch that is open. And that becomes counterproductive.
These violations could have severe consequences.
Today, we might forgive a little bit because it was the first day. We will have infections because of what happened today. No doubt about that. But what we don't want is an explosion of new infections. If we do have that explosion, there will be almost no choice left for the leadership of the country than to ask all of us to go back into our homes.
The Minister of Health appealed to hospitals that are rejecting patients for fear of COVID-19 not to do so, just as the National Coordinator calls on religious leaders in Kano State to take on the fight against the virus.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Foreign Affairs says there are over 4,000 Nigerians from across the world needing evacuation in the face of the ravaging COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Jeffrey Onyama was also speaking at the daily news briefing by the Presidential Task Force in Abuja. However, the minister notes that the lack of bed spaces to isolate the evacuees is a major challenge. He told journalists last week that the first set of evacuees from the United Arab Emirates will arrive the country today, but he explains why the expected flight did not arrive.
If we had our way, there are about almost 4,000 Nigerians wishing to come back home. If we had our way, we would bring them all back immediately and all at once. But there are various constraints, and the biggest constraint is where to quarantine them, the beds. So we've done everything we can to get beds here in Abuja and in Lagos. In Lagos, we have now about almost 300 beds available. And I did say that today we really hoped to start. We gave the date. The minimum requirements we were able to put in place and proposed to an airline. As I pointed out to you the last time, the Emirates had a flight that was cancelled a couple of weeks ago because we were not ready to receive that flight, and that was the lowest hanging fruit that we could start with. So they indicated that their flight from Dubai, that they would be able to operate not today, but on Wednesday. So by God's grace, on Wednesday, we will start the process of repatriating our nationals from outside the country.
And as we saw the easing of the federal government's lockdown order take effect today, residents of the nation's capital are struggling to comply with personal responsibility rules. In the suburbs and the city centre, there were large crowds in front of banks, overloading of taxis and buses, while many people did not wear face masks. Our correspondent Kayla Megwa reports.
Abuja is dealing with what can be described as teething problems following the ease of the lockdown. At 7:30 a.m., traffic is building up at the Kubwa Expressway. Traffic is back at the Duse Alaji area, while law enforcement agents discharge passengers in taxis not observing social distancing. At the Gwarimpa area, people walk around without face masks as commercial drivers overload their vehicles with passengers.
Why you don't wear them before? Too much this I'm protected. I'm covered.
I feel safe because if you keep the rules and regulations of people on the ground, you are safe.
They're not supposed to release while every day we keep seeing the number increasing. They're not supposed to allow it to relax the lockdown.
In Nyanya, the situation is worse. Huge crowds at the bus stops signify the return of the early morning rush. Many ignore the order to wear face masks in public.
People are going out without face masks. If you look at this, the commercial workers, some of them, they don't wear face masks. Even the bus, the passengers from here going to town without face masks. What do you expect the government to do?
I feel we should be at home to preserve ourselves, to prevent ourselves from the disease. But the need for us to have a source of income, to work and have a means of survival is very important.
In Lugbe, it's the same story. Crowded bus stops, no social distancing, and people without face masks are on the road. The residents are happy to be going back to work.
It's not been easy staying at home all this while. So at least we are resuming work today. The economy will begin to creep back gradually.
Honestly, as for me, as a health worker, I have been going to work. So today, is not an exceptional. So I have been going to work. I'm also great. I'm also happy that others are joining me in the workforce for today. So I feel great.
In Garki, the banks are adhering to the order not to have crowded banking halls. But the social distancing while customers wait their turn is non-existent. The days of the lockdown should have prepared residents for the new norm following the COVID-19 pandemic. Hopefully, this disregard for personal responsibility will not make the government rescind its decision to ease the restrictions. Kayla Nagwa, Channels Television News.
With the gradual easing of the 5-week lockdown in Lagos, Ogun and the FCT, residents here in Lagos trooped out in their numbers. While some people say it's too early to ease the lockdown, others say it remains the right thing to do in a country where many people fend for themselves on a daily basis. Our correspondent Gimba Umar, who monitored the situation, now reports.
Dawn breaks as lights twinkle from a distance. A gradual return to normalcy. The foot of the third mainland bridge begins the story. Some set out to work, a mindset suggestive of an eagerness to recover earnings lost in the past 5 weeks. Many wore their face masks in caution of COVID-19, the unseen devourer of men, as the death toll continues to rise. Buses are few as the people wait in clusters, while the fear of easing the lockdown lurks.
I think the number of cases will skyrocket. Since when we are at lockdown, the number keep increasing. Releasing us to come out now is just like sending us on suicide mission.
I feel the government should just, for now, they should even extend it. Because looking at the people around now, you can see the crowd and everything. So it's becoming too much and we need to be very, very careful.
The skies open to a torrential rainfall. Many take cover, putting social distancing at bay, as the risks of contracting the virus heightens. The rain soon ceases as the sky clears with more people emerging at bus stops. The risks outweigh the benefits. Staff buses are parked full. The third mainland bridge towards the island has even more cars. On returning, the mainland springs up. People from everywhere at the Ogudu area of the state. Elijah, a realtor, fears the worst would happen when persons are defiant of the basics.
They are going without a nose mask. I call someone and say, why are you not putting your nose mask? He say, like this woman now.
I no have money. Since 1 month I never go outside, go say I no get shinshin.
Okay, madam, go and buy face mask. For yourself, for your safety of your children.
Thank you, sir.
Hawkers are back on the streets in a struggle for survival as the city bounces back to its usual bustle in what seems a recovery race against time.
With vehicular movements such as this on the highways, it's a major concern for people that containing COVID-19 may just be a bigger challenge. Gimba Umar, Channels Television News.
Well, outside Lagos, let's look at the situation in Kano now. Despite the increasing number of COVID-19 confirmed cases, the state government there has relaxed the lockdown from today to Thursday between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. each day. Well, that's to enable residents get essentials during the Ramadan period. However, social distancing, washing and sanitizing of hands, wearing of face masks in public places, as ordered by the government, is not being complied with. A select number of shopping malls as well at Yankaba vegetable markets and fruit markets were allowed to open. In part 2, after the break, Katsina State confirms 35 fresh cases of COVID-19. 13 of them are health workers. That's in a moment. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Presidential Taskforce on COVID-19 raises concern of a possible spike in coronavirus cases following massive disregard for precautions. It says Nigeria is ready for clinical trial of vaccine and repatriation of citizens abroad. Mixed reactions over what was supposed to be gradual easing of lockdown in Lagos and Abuja as residents throng banks, breach transportation guidelines. Federal government receives over $300 million assets looted by a former military head of state, Sani Abacha, from the United States and the bailiwick of Jersey. And world leaders pledge more than $8 billion to help develop coronavirus vaccine and fund research into diagnosis and treatment of the disease. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Do subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android, Fire, and Roku TV as well. In Ondo State, Governor Rotimi Akeredolu has placed a ban on daily activities in major and community markets. Well, that's part of stricter measures to enforce social and physical distancing in areas that are usually crowded. The governor explains in a statement that the measures became necessary after the government observed that people who failed to adhere to basic precautionary measures to contain the pandemic. He named the days approved for market activities as Tuesdays and Thursdays of every week, warning that nobody should be seen within the market premises on unapproved days. Over in the southeast, residents of Owerri, the Imo State capital, have defied the social distancing guidelines following the easing of the lockdown order earlier put in place to contain the spread of the coronavirus disease. Our crew monitored activities in Owerri and noted that a large number of residents trooped out onto the streets, ignoring the government's directive that the easing of the lockdown is just in a few areas. People were seen going about their usual businesses and normal life, though there was significant compliance with the use of face masks in public, with about 6 out of every 10 persons complying. We have a bit more about compliance activities right here in the nation's capital, Lagos, even though the lockdown has been eased, allowing many residents to leave their homes for the first time in many weeks. Our correspondent, Dare Ido, reports that the level of compliance with guidelines by the state government is low, especially around banks and other public areas.
Commuting in Lagos through the public transport system comes with its own headache. And with COVID-19, the concerns appear to be rising. The government is mandating the use of face masks in public, and interstate travel is banned as part of the public safety measures. But here at Bega, the entry point into Lagos, commuters seem to have a way around beating the directive. The buses end the trip here for passengers to walk through the police blockade set up a few meters away. And from there, they find their way to their various destinations. Ensure provision of hand sanitizers to all passengers, reduce occupancy to maximum 50% of usual capacity, the guidelines stipulate, among other measures. Strict measures to contain the spread of COVID-19 have been in effect since late March, when President Muhammadu Buhari announced the lockdown order, and economic activities have been shut down since then. Now, to restart that process, the Lagos State government has released a set of guidelines which is expected to contain the spread of the virus at the community level. But are commuters and transport operators observing these measures? The mass transit service, BRT, run by the state government has been directed to cut the number of passengers to 20 with some other safety precautions.
This is my first time of coming out for the past 5 weeks. But I believe that BRT is more conducive, more especially as the governor has said that the BRT will carry 20 people. So I feel it's more appropriate that I use the BRT.
Social distancing appears to be distant, especially for the yellow buses. They load full capacity, and avoiding physical contact becomes difficult as seen at different bus stops and parks. These officials of the Lagos State Ministry of Transportation are on the road to ensure that people comply with the safety rules set by the government. For tricycle operators, the current arrangement is good for them and their passengers.
This is working because of the Okada people is not working. Most of them are carrying Okada 100 naira before. So they even appreciate that they see Marua and they have a social distance inside the tricycle.
The heavy economic cost on the country necessitated the decision of the government to ease the lockdown, and authorities are appealing to residents to comply with the measures in place to stop the spread of the virus. Dari Idowu, Channels Television News.
Let's cross over to Abuja now. Here's Ibrahim Adra. Ibrahim.
Hello, Ijoma. Good to see you, and I trust you're keeping well. Well, let's start from Katsina State, where authorities there have confirmed 35 fresh positive cases of COVID-19. 23 of the cases are from the state capital, with 1 from Daura, while the remaining 13 cases are medical staff. While providing an update on the COVID-19 pandemic in the state at the media briefing today, Governor Aminu Masari expressed concern over the rate at which the virus has continued to spread through community transmission. He appealed for testing facilities to be established in Katsina to complement the state government's effort at checking the spread of the virus. And amid surge in the numbers of the confirmed cases of the coronavirus in the northeastern part of Nigeria, 80 Almajiris have fled Bauchi State to Nasarawa State. The Almajiris, who were accompanied by their teachers, have been quarantined in Lafia pending reunion with their parents. Governor Abdullahi Sule revealed this when he visited the quarantine center at the Isa Mustafa Agwai Polytechnic in Lafia. On the other hand, the Taraba state government has rejected 100 Almajiris repatriated from Nasarawa State, saying that its quarantine center is not a dumping ground. This position was conveyed by the Chairman Technical Committee on COVID-19 in Taraba, Innocent Vakai, while briefing journalists in Jalingo, the state capital. According to him, the state government cannot accept any Almajiri whose health status on COVID-19 is not ascertained and not accompanied by any health official from the originating state. He, however, declined mentioning where the Almajiris are from. Mr. Vakai also revealed that the escapee patient, Dalatu Idris, has been found and returned to the isolation center. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking for international cooperation as he promises to intensify efforts to stop community spread of COVID-19 in Nigeria. Speaking at a virtual extraordinary summit of heads of state and government of the non-aligned movement, themed United Against COVID-19 Pandemic, he asked international financial institutions to assist member states in cushioning the negative effects of the pandemic. He suggested providing concessional loans, technical assistance, lowering of tariffs on medical equipment and consumables, as well as outright debt cancellation for member countries. President Buhari also urged member countries to empower scientists and medical experts in their countries to join the quest for a vaccine and a cure for the pandemic. Now, one of the major challenges faced by the Kano state government with regards to the ravaging COVID-19 pandemic is the non-availability of testing centers. A functional testing center at the Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital had to be closed for some days, leading to the intervention from the federal government. Now the state can boast of 2 testing centers as the Aliko Dangote Foundation has donated a 1,000-capacity mobile testing center to the state government, located at the Muhammadu Buhari Specialist Hospital, Kano.
Testing for COVID-19 in Kano State is about to get easier with the donation of a 1,000-capacity mobile testing center by the Aliko Dangote Foundation. The foundation is optimistic that the laboratory will make a big difference in the state after recording some of the highest cases in the country, sometimes overtaking Lagos and the FCT in daily records.
This lab that we're presenting today will be able to test 400 people a day, so 400 tests a day, ramping up to 1,000 tests a day in the next 2 weeks. The reason why this is important is because, as you all have heard, we've had this shortage of testing here. We will pay for everything related to the lab.
In the meantime, Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikwe Hekwazu, allays fears over the spread of the coronavirus in Kano State, giving an assurance that the pandemic will be contained.
I will mobilize every possible resource available to us. And when I say us, I don't mean the federal government or PTF every resource in the country to support the work they are doing.
Only just days ago, the Kano State Governor, Abdullahi Ganduje, had raised concerns that religious and cultural beliefs may aid the spike in cases. But this donation, in addition to the NCDC's 400 tests per day, appears to have eased some of those worries.
We have 44 local governments, and will ensure that each local government, the rural local government, that is 36 local government, will have each a collection center. But here in the 8 metropolitan local governments, we will have hundreds of collection centers, because this is where the majority of the population is.
With 342 COVID-19 cases recorded in over 3 weeks, Kano has overtaken the FCT with the second highest number of cases in the country.
When the News at 10 returns, we have more updates on COVID-19. Plus, nearly 83 million Nigerians currently living below poverty. And that's according to a latest report from the National Bureau of Statistics. I'll be coming to you on Business News. Do join us again.
Welcome back to the News at 10. The federal government has received over $311.79 million of the Abacha assets repatriated from the United States and the bailiwick of Jersey. This is confirmed in the statements from the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami. According to the AGF, the amount is a significant increase from over $308 million earlier mentioned in an issue in February 2020 because of the accruing interest between February the 3rd and April the 28th, when the fund was transferred to the Central Bank of Nigeria. He explains that the litigation process for the return of these assets, titled Abacha 3, commenced in 2014, while the diplomatic process that culminated in the signing of the assets return agreement commenced in 2018. Mr. Malami says the assets will be committed to expediting the construction of 3 major infrastructure projects, namely the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Abuja-Kano Road, and the Second Niger Bridge. He says the federal government is in the process of establishing a project monitoring team to oversee the implementation of the projects and report regularly on progress made to the public. Food and beverage giant Intercontinental Distillers have donated food items and beverages worth 20 million naira to the Ogun State government to cushion the effect of the lockdown and the earlier stay-at-home directives. The food items, which include bags of rice, 1,000 cartons of noodles, and 200 cartons of fruit wine, were presented to the state government through the Deputy Governor Noimot Salako Oyedele.
Food and beverage company Intercontinental Distillers Limited is giving out food items to residents in Ogun State as part of the company's corporate social responsibility aimed at giving back to society it operates in and assist people in cushioning the effects of the lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The items, which include 1,000 bags of rice, 1,000 cartons of noodles, and 200 cartons of Velleta fruit wine worth 20 million naira, were presented for onward distribution to the targeted beneficiaries.
We are happy to be part of the fight to control the spread of coronavirus in Ogun State. And I want to assure Your Excellency that Intercontinental Distillers will continue to support the state in this fight in whatever way possible. And we will also continue to reach out to the lives of the communities where we operate.
The state deputy governor commended the company and its management for the gesture and promised to continue working with genuine development partners towards flattening the curve of the pandemic.
Corporate partners here in Ogun State, you will continue to support us in this engagement with people right across the state. And we hope that you can continue also with this sensitization in those communities to make sure that the people there also know what it is that is expected of them.
Gestures like these from individuals and corporate organizations may just be a way out for some of the challenges occasioned by the lockdown and stay-at-home directive as government continues to find ways of putting an end to the effects of coronavirus.
Well, let's take a look at some business news now. And here's Teniola Shobowale.
Welcome to Business News. Latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows 82.9 million Nigerians are currently living below the national poverty line, representing 40.1% of the citizens. According to the 2019 Poverty and Inequality in Nigeria report released by the NBS today, northern states rank poorest with the highest poverty rate recorded in Sokoto State, which accounted for 87.73%. The lowest rate was in Lagos at 4.50%. A further breakdown of the report also shows that 52.1% of rural dwellers in Nigeria are poor, while only 18.4% of urban dwellers are classified as poor. On average, 4 out of 10 individuals are estimated to have real per capita expenditures below 137,430 naira per annum, which translates to 376 naira 5 kobo per day. FBN Quest Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index slipped to 45.8 in April from 47.9 recorded in March. On a 12-month moving average basis, the report shows that the headline index retreated from 53.0 to 52.1 in April. According to the report, output, which stood at 40.5, reflected the lockdown at some units and poor access to raw materials across all company sizes. FBN Quest says it will look out for the pass-through from restrictions on businesses and households in its May report. Well, the naira strengthened against the dollar by 3 naira 30 kobo today as the exchange rate closed at 364 at the investors and exporters forex window following the partial easing of lockdown by the federal government. This comes after the Central Bank of Nigeria resumed forex sales to bureau de change operators last Wednesday for school fees and small and medium enterprises. At the BDC segment of the forex market, the local currency gained 35 naira as the dollar traded at 430 compared to 465 traded on Thursday last week. The CBN had on March the 26th suspended foreign exchange sales to the BDC operators until further notice due to the COVID-19 lockdown as requested by the operators. Nigeria's crude are still facing difficulties attracting buyers as European refiners continue to snap up oil closer to home despite increasing prices. Traders noted significant cuts to Nigerian and Angolan export plans for May and June in line with the OPEC Plus producer agreement to reduce output and as a result of poor sales. Meanwhile, offer and sell prices for West African crude oil grades firmed further on Monday despite continued poor global demand due to a sharp fall in freight rates continuing from last week. Well, the domestic bourse begins the first trading week of May in the green, largely driven by investors' demand for the shares of MTN Nigeria, as total volume of trades weakens by 30.5% at the close of Monday's session. Chimeze Obi Waugu has the details.
Thank you and welcome to the Stock Market Report. There wasn't much enthusiasm at the market today as people were still very apprehensive as to what the outcome of the partial easing of the lockdown would be this week. However, the all-share index recorded a modest gain of 0.30% for the start of the week, all thanks to MTN. MTN is obviously having the best of time as people use more data by working remotely, and so investors expect impressive second quarter results from that company. But when you look at the sectoral indices board, it was more of red. The banking sector was pulled mainly by Access Bank. And this is not far from the recent rumor that the bank has laid off some of its staff. However, the bank has refuted that claim and says no such thing happened. And don't forget, the central bank has also given directive to all banks not to sack any of its staff. Not much was done in terms of volume and value compared to last trading session. About 238 million shares were sold for a little over 2 billion naira in 6,426 deals. The Nigerian Stock Exchange continues its remote trading and business activities. We can only wait and see how things pan out this week. And that was the stock market report. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago.
Thanks, Chimezie. Gains by tech shares lifted stocks on Wall Street as the close of today's trading session as other global markets end the day mostly lower. Here are some of their closing figures for the day. And that's Business News Tonight. It's back to you, Ijeoma.
Thanks a lot, Tenyola. The former Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, Taminu Turaki, has been granted bail on self-recognizance by Justice Inyangekwo of the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja. This comes after Mr. Turaki pleaded not guilty to 16 counts of unlawful and criminal misappropriation of funds. Mr. Turaki, a senior advocate of Nigeria, was arraigned earlier today by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Justice Ekwo also ordered the former minister not to travel outside the jurisdiction of the court without permission and also to deposit his international passport with the court registrar. Trial has been fixed for June the 22nd to the 25th. The Jigawa state government has set up a 5-man committee to investigate the reported deaths of over 100 people within the last 10 days in Hadija local government area. And that's been confirmed in a statement from the state chairman of the COVID-19 Taskforce, Dr. Abba Zakari, who is also the Commissioner for Health. He says the committee is expected to submit its report within 3 days. Still ahead on the news at 10, world leaders pledged more than $8 billion to help develop coronavirus vaccine and fund research into diagnosis and treatment of the disease. We'll have this and more from our London studios in Around the World in 5. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The Lagos State Judiciary, led by its Chief Judge, Justice Kazim Alugba, has held its first virtual court sitting. In the proceedings, Justice Mojisola Dada delivered judgment in the criminal trial of the state against Olalekan Hamid. Our judiciary correspondent, Shola Shoele, who hooked up to the virtual proceedings, reports that about 100 people participated remotely.
On a typical Monday morning, the premises of the Lagos High Court Ikeja would be bubbling with activities. But the need to stop the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic forced the judiciary across the country to suspend all court sittings. And the result? Empty courtrooms and an almost comatose justice system, except for urgent and time-bound matters. But the pandemic has not stopped conflicts and breach of fundamental rights. And so, to ensure continuity of court business, the Lagos State Judiciary, led by the Chief Judge, Justice Kazim Alugba, held its first virtual court hearing. Via a video app, Zoom, the CJ, judges of the court, members of the state's Ministry of Justice, led by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, some senior lawyers, and many others, participated in the online session from different locations. The trial judge, Justice Mojisola Dada, sitting in her courtroom, delivered a judgment that lasted almost 3 hours in the criminal trial of Olalekan Hamid, a driver who was charged by the state for stealing and for the murder of 76-year-old Jolason Kusoya, the mother of his employer. The defendant and other prison officials participated in the virtual proceedings from the Ikoyi Correctional Service Center, where the defendant is being remanded.
You could see from the proceedings that certain things are essential to make it a success. Power supply. You will imagine what would have happened if there was power failure. So that underscores the necessity for constant power supply. Secondly, connectivity.
So we're partners, we're fully on board with the judiciary to make today's virtual sitting a reality. We've been in discussions with them, we've encouraged them, we've supported them in every possible way that we can, because we feel that we're in a new normal situation.
The Chief Judge and the Attorney General say that virtual proceedings are here to stay, and they're encouraging all members of the legal community, litigants, and indeed all stakeholders to partner with them to ensure that justice works for all. Shola Shoele, Channels Television News.
In other legal matters, a former senator representing Kogi West at the National Assembly, Dino Melaye, is suing the House of Representatives over the Control of the Infectious Diseases Bill 2020. Senator Melaye is asking the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja to declare that some sections of the bill, which are currently being debated on the floor of the House of Representatives, are draconian, oppressive and authoritarian. He insists, among other things, that the provisions are in breach of his fundamental rights as provided for in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. No date has been fixed for the hearing of the suit, but counsel to Senator Melaye explains the reason behind the suit.
The provisions of the bill are likely to breach his fundamental rights. The provisions of the bill are draconian, authoritarian, and undemocratic. They infringe upon the fundamental rights of virtually every Nigerian. A situation where someone will be forced to be vaccinated, a situation where someone will be arrested without any justification, without any prior test to find out whether the person is having an infectious disease or not. A situation whereby premises are locked down at the whims and of the DG of the Center of Disease Control, we think is going to infringe upon his fundamental rights. It is on that basis that he has filed an action in court, asking the court to declare the provisions, certain provisions of the bill as infringing upon his fundamental rights. Such provisions are unconstitutional.
More than $8 billion has been pledged by world leaders and organizations to help develop a coronavirus vaccine and fund research into diagnosis and treatment of the disease. The online campaign was led by the European Commission President and organized by the EU, non-EU states, Britain, Norway, Japan, Canada and Saudi Arabia. Let's head over to our London studios now, where Simon Pusey has more international news in Around the World in 5.
Hello and good evening from the Channel Studios in London with your international news around the world in 5. Millions of Europeans have emerged from lockdown, with Italy, which was once the world's worst hit country, leading the way out of its 2-month quarantine period. Italians will now be able to leave their homes more freely, with many workplaces reopening provided they can meet social distancing rules. With more than 29,000 coronavirus-related deaths, Italy has the world's second highest death toll after the United States. Meanwhile, in Spain, businesses with premises under 400 square metres, like hairdressers and flower shops, have also reopened. It's as the lockdown restrictions have been loosened in part of a 4-phase plan. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said on Saturday that 6 million masks were due to be distributed, which are now mandatory on public transport. The death toll climbed by 164 in the previous 24 hours to 25,428.
I want them to go back. We have to get our country back.
US President Donald Trump has said there had to be more help for Americans suffering from the economic crisis caused by the virus, indicating that he wants Congress to pass another aid bill. Congress has already made $3 trillion available, intended to ease the heavy economic toll of the crisis.
Number one, there's more help coming. We have really no choice because incredible people like this are, it's not your fault. I mean, just remember that it's not your fault. And there is more help coming. There has to be. To get our life back. We have to get our country back. We have to get the world back. We want to have, if we have a stadium in Alabama that holds 110,000 people against LSU, I went there. We want to have 110,000. We don't want to have 25,000 people or 40,000 people. And that'll happen. Maybe it's going to be a vaccine, or maybe it's going to be that this virus will pass. It will go. Will it come back? It might. It could. Some people say yes, but it will pass.
According to China's Ministry of Culture and Tourism, the country's tourism numbers have soared during the May Day holiday as the government has continued to ease lockdown measures. Domestic tourists made nearly 85 million trips in the first 3 days of the holiday, boosting China's tourism revenue by almost $5 billion. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has railed against the country's lockdown in a speech to thousands of anti-confinement demonstrators outside his presidential palace. Bolsonaro blamed state governors for continuing the lockdown, insisting that the strict containment measures are damaging the economy. The number of confirmed COVID-19 infections in Brazil has passed 100,000, with more than 7,000 deaths. Venezuela's government has said it has blocked an attack from the sea, killing 8 members of a group of alleged mercenaries who are planning terrorist attacks aimed at overthrowing President Nicolas Maduro. The government said the mercenaries attempted to enter the country on a speedboat from neighbouring Colombia. Opposition leaders have dismissed the events as a staged incident. In western Kenya's Budalangi, residents have carried their belongings away from submerged houses via boats and motorbikes after the river Nzoia burst its banks. 1,800 families have been made homeless after heavy rainfall caused flooding and landslides across the region. The government has said that 116 people have died due to flooding across 29 counties. Greece has transferred vulnerable migrants from the overcrowded Moira camp on Lesbos Island to the mainland as part of preventative measures against the virus outbreak. The migrants wore face masks and their temperatures were taken before being bussed to the port. There have been no cases of coronavirus in Moira camp so far, but refugee agencies warn that the threat of an outbreak is high. In Bangladesh's capital Dhaka, a long line of people feeling unwell formed outside a hospital with hopes of getting a coronavirus test. The country has been in lockdown for over a month due to the virus pandemic, with many businesses shut, although some garment factories have reopened. Bangladesh has reported just under 10,000 cases of COVID-19 and has 177 deaths so far. And finally, not all heroes wear capes, but these ones do. Spraying disinfectant and beating slit drums, a group of superheroes have been walking the streets of Indonesia to warn people about the danger of the virus and to teach them tricks to combat it. Local residents said the initiative was interesting and creative as it captured the attention of younger children. Indonesia has reported 11,192 coronavirus infections so far and 845 deaths.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Welcome to Sports News. German football authorities have confirmed that 10 individuals from the country's top 2 divisions have returned positive coronavirus tests. A total of 1,724 tests were carried out on players from 36 clubs in the top 2 tiers of German football. La Liga organizers are aiming for a June restart to the season, which was halted by the coronavirus crisis as clubs returned to training this week, following by the Spanish Ministry of Health. In accordance with the return to training protocol drawn up with medical experts, professional players from the first and second divisions will start training alone following medical tests carried out by club staff. That's Sports News. Back to you, Joma, for the conclusion of the news at 10.
Thanks a lot, Olumide. And the main news again. The Presidential Taskforce on COVID-19 today raised concern over a possible spike in coronavirus cases following massive disregard for precautions. The PTF also said Nigeria is ready for clinical trial of the vaccine and repatriation of citizens abroad. Also today, mixed reactions over what was supposed to be a gradual easing of the lockdown in Lagos and Abuja as residents thronged banks and breached transportation guidelines. And that's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Unyato. Do your best to stay safe. Good night.